Hello and welcome back. So for this week, we're going to start talking about this idea of spreadable media, participatory culture, and the origin of viral. And so to begin, we're going to talk about spreadable media. Spreadable media examines an emerging hybrid model of circulation where a mix of top-down and bottom-up forces determine how material is shared across and among cultures in far more participatory and messier ways. What are the decisions that each of us make about whether to pass along media texts that are reshaping the media landscape itself? And so thinking about this and how we ourselves are participatory in nature and how that kind of behavior translates into an online format, right? So this idea that spreadable media is going to look a little bit different than what we're talking about in terms of viral. So we're going to do a little bit of a comparison. To start, let's think about what is spreadability. So spreadability refers to the potential, both technical and cultural, for audiences to share content for their own purposes, sometimes with the permission of rights holders and sometimes against their wishes. It's a really important thing to think about because as we move forward, we're going to talk about things like remix culture, Creative Commons, and intellectual property, and how does that factor in to when content is taken and repurposed in a way that the original content creator no longer has that control, and what kind of moral and ethical issues come up with that. But in terms of its spreadability, spreadable media focuses on the social logics and cultural practices through digital media as a catalyst for reconceptualizing other aspects of culture, rethinking of social relations, reimagining cultural and political participation, revision of economic expectations, and reconfiguration of legal structures. So again, this idea of content that is spreadable by nature, it continues to grow up and down and brings in participation through the audience, creates other issues, and some of this being legal, economic, cultural, political, and certainly reconceptualizing the ways in which culture is affected by the way that content is spreading online. So we're going to borrow a term through digital marketing and marketing in general that talks about stickiness, sticky marketing. Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point in 2000 and other publications have talked about broadly this idea of stickiness, and that it refers to the need to create content that attracts audience attention and engagement. So Gladwell uses stickiness to describe the aspects of media text which engender deep audience engagement and might motivate them to share what they learn with others. So this model of stickiness looks like movements of individuals, centralized content, so butts in seat, thinking that everyone is in one location, unified experiences or pre-structured interactivity, attracting and holding attention, scarce, limited channels, sales of forced marketing, separate and distinct roles, and those roles being between producer of content and consumer of content, right? So stickiness is really about control. Then you have this idea of spreadability, which is what we're talking about today. And this is a flow of ideas, a dispersed content, diverse experiences, and open-ended participation, encouraging sharing, many networks, grassroots advocacy, blurred and collaborative roles, right? So spreadability is really about participating and participation. Like other impression-based constructs, stickiness models focuses on counting isolated audience members. How spreadability, on the other hand, recognizes the importance of the social connection among individuals, connections increasingly made visible and amplified by social media platforms. And we see that this difference between these two models, the stickiness model being it's clear who the producer, the marketer, and the audience are, each performing a separate and distinct purpose. Whereas in spreadable media, spreadable model, there's not only an increased collaboration across these roles, but in some cases, a complete blurring of the distinctions between these roles. Spreadable media is really rooted in something called participatory culture. And this is located in a lot of media scholarship that we think of as the foundation to what we're doing in media. And so Henry Jenkins coined this phrase as the cultural production and social interactions of fan communities, initially seeking a way to differentiate the activities of fans from other forms of spectatorship. So public, not simply consumers of pre-constructed messages, but are shaping, sharing, reframing, and remixing media content in ways in which might not have been previously imagined. So Henry Jenkins has a couple attributes to think about when you're locating participatory culture and what we're doing with media content creation. And so one of the things is affiliations, memberships, formal and informal, and online communities centered around various forms of media. So think about some examples where you've recognized the importance of affiliations, right? Expressions, producing new creative forms such as digital sampling, video making, and mashups. This is where, if you think about DJ culture, right, the music industry and remixing different beats and sounds together, this has been a big part of the culture of DJs, of music, right? That expressions, that remixing of digital sampling of music. Collaboration, so problem solving and working together in teams to complete tasks and develop new knowledge. Again, participatory culture is really about collaboration. It comes together where people work together, whether they're producing, they're remixing, they're reimagining, they're participating in dialogue about it. It's a big part of participation, right? Of participatory culture. And circulation, shaping the flow of media such as podcasting, microblogging. And when we talk about microblogging, we're talking about Twitter. We're talking about platforms in which little bits of information are shared but can give a big narrative. And so one thing as we move on into this process that keeps coming up, especially now during the stay-at-home, stay-in-place, I'm noticing is the role of TikTok. And some of you might have been jumping on a little late. Some of you maybe already do TikTok. I'm in the older generation, so looking at it now, it's definitely falling into this participatory culture breakdown. I'm recognizing these components pretty significantly in that TikTok culture. I myself maybe have created one or two TikToks, but I'm not telling you where that is. So the origin of viral and viral content, I want us to talk about the term itself and where it comes from, specifically in relation to media and content creation like we're talking about it. So it first appeared in science fiction stories describing generally bad ideas that spread like germs. So science fiction novel in 1992, Snow Crash, is considered one of the first seminal texts that talk about viral. All right, so the public is described as susceptible to its pull, and participants become unknowing hosts of the information they carry across the social networks. Douglas Rushkoff's 1994 book, Media Virus, argues that media materials can act as a Trojan horse, spreading without the user's conscious consent. People are duped into passing a hidden agenda while circulating compelling content. In some ways, we can see this, not that media is like a virus, but actually media itself is a virus, right? So thinking that it spreads its own code as far and wide as possible from cell to cell and from organism to organism. So you can see the negative connotation that happens when you think about the term viral, and viral having this whole new level of recognition, certainly with COVID-19. But when we're talking about it in terms of media, there's a parallel. We see that negative connotation with this idea of viral, yet it's appealing. We use that term a lot because people recognize it as meaning it's spread far and wide. But spreadable content might actually be a better term to use when thinking about the kind of content you want to go far and wide. So I want us next to think about memes. So memes itself, the term is rooted in biology. Okay, so in 1976, the book The Selfish Gene, famed British evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins introduced the meme, which was to become both an incredibly important and an incredibly overused idea, just like its viral companion. So just as genes propagate themselves in the gene pool by leaping from body to body via sperms and egg, memes propagate themselves in the meme pool by leaping from brain to brain via a process which, in the broad sense, can be called imitation. If a scientist hears or reads about a good idea, he passes that on to his colleagues and students. He mentions it in his articles and in his lectures, and if the idea catches on, it is said to propagate itself, spreading from brain to brain. The meme is a cultural equivalent to the gene, the smallest evolutionary unit. Cultural transmission as analogous to genetic transmission. So the notion of the meme has itself spread in meme-like fashion. It provides a compelling way to understand the dispersion of cultural movements, especially when seemingly innocuous or trivial trends spread and die in rapid fashion. So why memes matter? Okay, so the next part of our experimenting with content here, we did our buzz quizzes, and now we're going to create memes. But I want you to understand why this is so important in terms of talking about viral and spreadable media. So Whitney Phillips, a doctoral student at the time, was working on her dissertation at the University of Oregon and focused on cultural practices, production, and performances associated with the 4chan, an online community that actively encourages behavior, which is often described as antisocial troll-like. Phillips argued that even disrespectful remixing is generative. 4chan members adopted a distinctive model for thinking about the contributions they make to culture, actively seizing on memes as tools for creativity and production. So memes are not passive and do not follow the model of biological infection. Instead, memes are microcosmic nests of evolving content. Memes spread, that is, that they are actively engaged and are remixed into existence because something about a given image or phrase or video line up with an already established set of linguistics and cultural norms. It's a way for us to communicate without having to produce the content ourselves, right? It's that remix. Asserts cultural literacy and frame every act of reception as an act of cultural production. So one of the examples that we're going to look at in depth this week has to do with the story that happened in 2007 with Chris Crocker. You may have heard of him, vaguely remember this story, the Leave Britney Alone guy. I like his little tweet here he had made. Hi, I'm the Leave Britney Alone guy. I was a meme and laughingstock for 10 years. A lot of the origins to where we are now with how content is taking on its life, we can locate some of that beginning with the story of Chris Crocker. So I want you to watch the video, Me at the Zoo, to get that. Normally we would watch it in class, but I'm going to ask you to rent it. You can get it for $1.99, $2.99 on YouTube or other places, and watch that story so we can talk about that in the discussion. Okay, so we're going to make memes, and we are diving into the story of Chris Crocker this week. I look forward to seeing what you guys produce, and I'll see you next week.